Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be looking at the 1961 Hugo Award winner written by Poul Anderson, and the title of this story is The Longest Voyage. So I thought it was kind of interesting that I found some commentary about this online, and I just thought I would share it with you here because it's good. So there's a site called Young People Read the Old Stuff. Someone named Chris said, "The plot is glacial." Chris, I agree. Kit, from the same website, had this to say: "This story has a horrible, outdated moral, because I do think we're supposed to think the captain was right." Some of the aspects of this story are that native peoples are fit to be conquered. And, we know now that's an outdated way of seeing the world, right? It doesn't really appear to be that in this story. Now, interestingly, I did see somebody comment at the bottom of one of these mentions on this website, and he was someone who had done a bunch of research into Poul Anderson's story, and he said that there are basically 3 levels going on in this story, and that Poul Anderson is pretty much getting everybody with a wink and a nod and kind of outsmarting everybody, and I don't know what the fuck he's talking about because I didn't see that in this story at all. The story of The Longest Voyage it's really not that complicated. It's somewhat of a simple story. There's a ship known as the Golden Leaper, and it is a privateer, I would assume. It's an exploration ship. They're doing a circumnavigation of a planet in honor of their queen, and the captain is Captain Rovik, and there's an incidental additional character who is also a viewpoint character known as Zine. This is pretty much Captain Rovik's story, although Zine is telling it. The man of action in the story is good old Captain Rovik. So right at the beginning of the story, it is, from line 1, it is related that they're looking for a sky ship. So they're heading off. They are known as Montalarians, and they are heading off to find out, about this sky ship because they're very curious about what it is and what it entails. They are a human-descended race who are living on a moon that is orbiting around a Jovian planet, and they have fallen into kind of a dark ages, and they are slowly but surely rising up out of it. I don't know that you could really be that close to a Jovian planet. So at the very beginning of the story, the Golden Leaper's crew have had enough, and they're afraid. They're circumnavigating the planet, and this is not something that anyone has probably done successfully before, or not very often anyway. They really want to get out of this predicament, and so the captain has to stand them down. And there is just the longest, old-fashioned, ye old sea dog talk from the captain, which is done, deliberately in the language that it's done in, so that I think he can kind of have a meeting of the minds with the men, so to speak. And it's, for me, it was unbearable. I did not enjoy it, and I was glad when it was done, and we got back to using basically the standard English that all of us are used to using. American English, the good stuff. The Golden Leaper and her crew are subdued by Captain Rovik, and we have this other character. He's kind of the viewpoint guy. So then they get to the island. There's an island off the coast of the island where the sky ship is, and so they start dealing with the chief, I suppose you would say, of that island. They're greeted well, and I guess everyone's trying to play it cool. And we have more advanced technology, metal weapons and things like that, meeting up with wooden and Stone Age weaponry and different things like that. Captain Rovik and a small band of his privateers, including the guy who's telling the story, Zine, they all go ashore, and they get to meet up with the big king, the big cheese who's in charge on the island, and he eventually winds up introducing them to his oracle, and this is, of course, the guy who came down in the sky ship. So Rovik and his people get to have a kind of a closed-door meeting with this guy. And this guy has been stuck on the planet for decades. He's been stuck with these folks because his spaceship broke down, and it was just some basic things that happened, and it's not able to fly anymore. And of course, what it needs is about a gallon of mercury in order to get back into space. That's a hell of a condition for needing flight. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out how how a gallon of Quicksilver was going to help him get in the air. But it's a conceit of the story, so it actually works. This guy, the man from outer space, and his name is Val Nira. And as it turns out, he's I believe, a Caucasian person who came down in the spaceship, and they've been holding him prisoner for, I think it was like 40 years. He's been there for a long time. He's been there so long that he's concerned that his wife really won't be waiting for him anymore and may not even be alive at this point. And I thought it was kind of odd as soon as I read that, and this is kind of the same thing that I encountered when I was reading The Cold Equation. Why is there no technical backup for finding this guy? I mean, a long time ago, if people turned up missing, you sent out search parties. It's kind of a basic thing. This guy talks about how advanced his civilization is and how great it is and how peaceful it is and how perfect it is, and yet they don't have goddamn search parties. So they left him on this planet to live in these primitive conditions while he's physically and mentally wasting away and kind of at the mercy of these people who, if he doesn't deliver for them, they might actually kill him because they have a lot of their own political machinations going on. And he is somewhat caught up in that as he has become a quasi-religious figure to them. So, his life is always in danger if he's not performing accurately, and no one's coming to rescue him. A bunch of things happen in this story, and they are the literary equivalent of paint drying, and then we get to Captain Rovik makes some decisions about what he's going to do about the natives having a spaceship and about them having a man who knows how to operate and maintain a spaceship. When I read Captain Rovik's final decision, I actually scoffed out loud and slammed the book closed. And I think that's the first time in my entire life that I've ever done that with a story. And so, that's something, right? Rovik and his guys are all too happy to get out their cannons and shoot the living shit out of the natives when it becomes necessary. I mean, it's self-defense. I understand. They got to do it, right? That's something that, the characters represent people, and this is the kind of things that people do when they're in danger, so you're going to have that. Also, the native people attack them, but they attack them for what they did. That brings us to talking about what they did. And so I'm going to talk about something that is a little bit of a spoiler. Captain Rovik blows up the goddamn spaceship, and he blows it up because he doesn't want the natives to have it, and he can't get it away from them. But he has, and also, the alien, who's been waiting around for 40 years to get off this goddamn planet, runs to try and stop it from blowing up and gets blown up with it. So that's an easy solution for him, right? I mean, that is some lazy-ass goddamn right. So the captain's justification for blowing up, it was eye-rolling. The ship would have been a handicap in the end because we would not have had to work as hard to get where we're going. And so someday we'll get there. We'll get where Val Nira was. But for now, I've destroyed that ship so that nobody can have it. And basically, what the captain is saying is that those native people can't get ahead of us now, and I just made sure that we stay superior over them by destroying their only advantage. And of course, he used nothing but subterfuge, wit, and guile to outsmart them and set them up and basically bait them into getting so mad at him that he was left with no choice but to destroy the ship. If we're going to look at the story with a critical eye, and just to be serious here for a moment, this is an important aspect of this story. This story is about basically white people going to a native island and killing a bunch of natives, destroying their gods. This story got a Hugo Award. Reading this story has helped me to understand exactly what Gibson was reacting to in the Gernsback continuum. And that was all of those idealistic dreams of the past that Hugo Gernsback and the science fiction authors of the 20s, 30s, and 40s laid down, that became the V2 rockets. Instead of rockets to space and freedom and emancipation for humanity, they became V2 rockets that fell on Britain, and they became missiles, bombs, and rockets that rained down on Koreans and then later North Vietnamese. Our dreams of this great future, come what may, always seem to turn into us just killing people. One of the aspects of the story that also interested me was that this was a story of the possibility of an uplift. You know, the spaceman had crashed on this planet with his ship and was interacting with the native peoples, and there was the very real possibility of, you know, uplifting them. But, you know, this is a story about an uplift that is thwarted, and in the thwarting of the uplift possibility for these people, that is actually seen as a virtue in the story. You can begin to see that if we start to take a more modern 2024 look at this, instead of a 1961 look at this, what we begin to realize is seeing the people on the island as savage natives, we know, was, you know, not a thing. It was not a thing everywhere anyway. Of course, on some islands, people were probably not welcoming, but there are plenty of experiences where people, you know, were welcoming. And either way, they got the same treatment, right? So there is this colonialism and plunder mentality going on in this story. And certainly, you know, these narratives were a big part of science fiction in many different ways back then, including, you know, movies and in TV. Many of these things are worth considering, but, you know, it's also a science fiction story, right? It's a story. I understand. You know what I mean? We don't need to, we certainly don't need to belabor these points on everything that we ever see. This is an outdated, outmoded way of seeing the world. And the interesting thing is that, you know, in the 60s, there were plenty of people who saw this way of thinking as outdated and outmoded. I mean, at the same time that this story was being written, you have to ask yourself, would Ursula Le Guin have written a story like this? You know, I would have to say that if Ursula Le Guin wrote a story like this, she would highlight the tragedy for the natives.